All right, so here we are in part 2 of this week's 3-part lecture for crime scene sketching, which is part of the crime scene processing area. All right, so sketch is a permanent record that shows the actual relationships between objects. Our photography showed the objects, but sometimes in photography you can't tell if something is close together or not. So like right now, are my hands an inch apart or a foot apart? Well, they're about an inch apart. And now, are they an inch apart or a foot apart? Well, you can tell it's further apart, but even then, not even like 3 inches. So we end up with that depth issue, and some of those depth correlation things people have a hard time with. So what we're looking for is an ability to create something that gives us the dimensions of the room and our scales. So when you look at a photograph and you look at the sketch, you say, oh, okay, I see how the door's on this wall and the window's on this wall and they're this far apart, and the objects in the middle of the room, I can now tell exactly how they correlate with each other. It's also a really good visual aid for court, where you can start saying, well, here is the guy walked in here and he went over here and he went out the window over here, and somebody can, look at the sketch of the scene and see all of this. Versus with photographs, you'd have to show them, well, here's a photograph showing the one side of the room, here's a photograph showing the other side of the room, and use your imagination to imagine what this actual room looks like. So it really helps us out quite a bit to have both photographs and sketches. 2 kinds of sketches we typically are doing at our crime scenes. Well, actually, one we're doing at the crime scene, one we're doing later for the crime scene, but we're doing it back at the PD. The first type is the one we do at the crime scene, which is a rough sketch. You do that on the scene, and it is just literally a doodle. Then our final sketches, sometimes called a finished sketch, we do that later on. We do that back at our police agencies or crime labs, and we do that at a way that makes it to scale, or at least shows scale better than our rough sketch. So here's an example of a rough sketch. This is a drawing of an office setting, and it makes absolutely no sense to anybody but the person who drew it. And you can see some notes on there, and you can see some different things, and it makes absolutely no sense to you unless you were to see photos of the office. Now, here's a final sketch. This one's done by hand. Now things make a little more sense. It's still a little difficult until you have the legend, which unfortunately doesn't show here on the PowerPoint very well, but this is a chair, and there's a cushion on the chair. This is a desk. That's an old style computer monitor. The little keyboard drawer. This is a little drawer that pulls out for the mouse and stuff, and just some different little things, or not the mouse, but I forget, this was something that pulls out of the drawer of the desk, some kind of drawer. Different things on the desktop. You've got some papers, you've got stapler, some different objects, just the inlays, the little things where data and power comes up. Here's another little desk chair and the door to the office, a little credenza, that little plastic mat you put under the desk so your chair rolls around without wrecking your carpet. So it makes more sense. You show this and then you show the crime scene photos, and people are going to be like, oh yes, I see exactly what you're talking about. Here's from a car crash. Here's a rough sketch. Here we have Highway 151, which is a state highway in the southern part of the state. Ran right through the city of Platteville where I worked. And at the time, now it's a bypass. We won't talk about that today though. But you have your northbound lane, your southbound lane, and then a middle turn lane to get into businesses that were along the road here. Walmart, Menards, all those things. We've got 2 vehicles that crashed. Vehicle 1, Vehicle 2. There was also a motorcycle involved. That's a motorcycle. I know, I'm such a great drawer. And that's the person who was riding the motorcycle, got thrown off the bike and laying in the road. And so this gives us some interesting ideas of, okay, well, one vehicle is sitting here in the turn lane, the other vehicle ended up down in the ditch over here, motorcycle stayed in the turn lane, and there's a debris field here in the middle, which we don't really always mark in our sketches unless there's items of evidence that are important to us. Versus this one, I had a computer-aided drawing program that I used to create my final sketch. And so with the final sketch, we've got Vehicle 1, Vehicle 2, the motorcycle, the victim, and this is done to a particular scale. It's kind of cut off. We've got our legend here, which talks about our date, our case number, the reference point. Reference point is what we take measurements from. Talk about that in the next slideshow. And there would have been the scale and some other information on here. Notice it's cut off in the slide. Shoot. Here we've got the case number. We've got all of our measurements, the measurement points, where we took a measurement to point A, to point B, to point C, to point D. It does say down under here, drawing not to scale. Make sure if you have a drawing that is not to scale that you are noting that. Now, When we are looking at our crime scene sketches, there's a couple different perspectives. And perspective is just, how you're looking at something. You're looking at it from this way, looking at it from this way. Typically, a lot of our crime scene sketches, bird's eye view. It's like somebody took the ceiling off the room, took the roof off the building, and you're able to look down in there. But sometimes evidence is over here on the wall, so we need an elevation view sketch. From time to time, we need to see stuff that is both elevation view and from that top down, so we make three-dimensional sketches. If you don't have access to a computer program, three-dimensional sketches are impossible to make, so then you might make what we call an exploded view drawing. Sometimes too, when we have evidence on the ceiling, well, then we use the exploded view to help us, because a three-dimensional view, we're not able to see the ceiling unless we start moving cameras around and stuff like that. Cameras not being a physical click camera, but the camera of the computer for the drawing program. So here is an example of a overhead view. We've got our crime scene sketch. You've got a room, got a gun on the floor, got some bullet casings, got a dude in the bed, he's got some blood, and we've got this here, 6 and 7. And we'll look down at our legend, 6 and 7 are bullet hole in the glass. Well, I'm not showing an indicator of a window here. So usually, we draw with architectural symbols. So if you don't have a drawing, a little notation for a window, does that mean there's a mirror on the wall? Or is there a big picture, like a big painting? I don't know. What do I got? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so here it is. We'll just say it's a mirror. It could be a window, but we'll just call it a mirror, simply because the other drawing doesn't have the architectural notations of there being a window there. So let's not even get into the point of the fact that this would be then an illegal bedroom by not having an escape route. We're not a fire investigation class, haha. But here we are, west wall of the building. We can see we've got this mirror that's hung on the wall, and we've got 2 bullet holes in the mirror. One's kind of low, one's kind of high. Interesting. Now, problem is again, we sometimes will have that citizen on the jury who might not understand that that wall is that wall, because in this picture the wall goes up and down the page, and in this picture the wall goes left and right. That's just a problem we sometimes have with people. They can't put 2 different images together in their mind to create one image. So let's put them together for them. Oh, see, here we go. Now we've got our mirror. You can even see the nice little mirror frame. And so we've got the gun on the floor, we've got the door, we've got the bed, we've got the end table, the dresser. So everything's noted. And all right, this one is not done to scale because sometimes we get 3Ds. Things kind of get with views. It's hard to always keep things right to the proper scale because of proportionality as they start bending in. All right. Now, if you can't draw this, if you don't have the software to do this, what you can easily do is an exploded view. You can do this with a pencil and paper. So now here we've got the issue where the person says, well, on one drawing the picture is going up and down, and the next drawing it's going left to right. Which is it, officer? Well, we've taken care of that. And I always relate this to kindergarten. My kids right now are doing this themselves in school, where they cut out a shape, and as long as they're not eating the glue stick, you fold it up, you paste it together, and you got a box. So I think all of us who make it to jury duty have been through kindergarten and have probably done this little project in class where, we've got this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall. All you have to do is fold them up. Now we're not going to give the jury, glue sticks and ask them to paste this together. We're going to ask them to do it here in their mind, that we present this up on the wall in the courtroom, and we explain this is what we found in the crime scene. There's my door. There's my bed, there's my gun, there's my holes in the wall, there's the casings, there's where the guy is bleeding. So this is not probably a self-inflicted gunshot wound, or it is, or whatever the story of the case is that we are telling. Hope that makes sense. Now, in order to get these measurements, in order to get these diagrams to scale, we got to take measurements. Typically, a couple different ways of taking measurements: baseline, rectangular coordinates, triangulation, polar coordinates. I'm going to tell you this. Baseline is what we use 90% of the time these days. We've really moved away from triangulation. Yeah, your textbook author likes to make a big deal about the fact that triangulation is the most accurate out there. Great, but trying to correlate triangulation back to our drawing programs to make the drawings doesn't work so well. Baseline, it's very easy. What we're literally doing is we're taking and we're laying a tape measure down. It could be at the edge of the crime scene. It could be through the middle of the crime scene. It doesn't really matter where we put it. We just have what we call a reference point. So it's something that's immovable, like a street, telephone pole on the street, which, yes, those are mobile, but we, where each pole is because of GPS coordinates. We're talking about fire hydrants. We're talking about the actual corner of an intersection. Lots of different baselines out there. And we're running a tape measure out from that baseline in a cardinal direction, north, south, east, or west. And then we tape that down, we spike it down, we hold it down to the ground, and then we end up taking a second measurement off of that tape measure. So the corner of this box is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 feet to the south of our reference point. And then with the second tape measure, we measure over 5 feet and 5 inches. And so we'd literally end up with a coordinate that would be, south 6.5 times east 5.5. And so now when I go to make a drawing, I get a piece of graph paper, I make a dot on that graph paper, and I measure down, say if every graph square is, the equivalent of a foot, I measure down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes, go halfway across the box, then count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes, measure over half a box, make a dot, and that's where I draw my box. Now, very simple, very easy to make our diagrams. Rectangular coordinates is just taking measurements from 2 different sides, basically a double baseline. You set up a baseline going to the left and to the right, and you take 2 sets of measurements. Pretty cool. Again, this doesn't input into a computer system as well for doing our drawing. Triangulation, we have 2 different points we measure from, and we measure the distance from those 2 points to the objects that are evidence, and multiple points on that, and each one of these makes a triangle. Very, very accurate form of measurement. Very difficult to enter these coordinates into a computer drawing program and actually get a good, easy drawing to come back out of them. And then polar coordinate mapping or grid coordinate mapping. This is really only used at major, large-sized crime scenes outdoors, where what you're doing is you're creating a baseline, you're measuring your distance from your reference point to an object, and then what is the angle of the line you've created. And basically this is used for making measurements that are going to be hundreds of yards long, where we just literally don't have measuring tapes long enough to make these measurements. So you're talking about huge, huge, huge crime scenes. And even with this, what we're going to end up doing probably these days is get out the forensic surveyors and use the total station or the Leica 3D scanners or some of those new technologies to create our crime scene diagrams. All right, so that's diagramming and the measurements used to get these diagrams. And we will finish up then with our crime scene searches.